I would think that more people should learn about Larry Itliong, who was a labor organizer coming out of California. He was a farm worker and farm laborer for many, many years, for decades. And it wasn't until the 1960s that he ended up becoming the leader of an organization called the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, the AWOC. By the 1960s, he and his crew are ready to make something happen in a substantive way. And this takes place in Coachella. They have a successful strike, and months later they go to Delano, California, and they try to duplicate the success that they had in Coachella. It's at that point where
Is this the Delano grape strike?
It becomes that, right. And so what Itliong and his crew try to do is they end up having to convince Cesar Chavez, who's leading the National Farm Workers Alliance, to go out on strike with them. So Larry and the AWOC are out there in the fields first for a week. And they're looking at Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and they're saying, look, we need you out here because we're stronger together. Cesar Chavez, who is a master tactician, master organizer himself, saying, look, we're a different group of laborers out here. I need 2 years to get this done. And Itliong is looking at Chavez and saying, look at us. We don't have 2 more years left. We're ready to do this. We're ready to go for broke, as they say. But it was Larry Itliong and the Filipino workers that convinced Cesar Chavez to join them out in the fields. And a week later, they did. When they did, they changed the world. They created the United Farm Workers. They protected agricultural workers that are out there harvesting all of these agricultural goods for us. And you know what? Those farm workers are still out there, still in need of protection. Right. And we have an object in the collection that memorializes that. It's a small pin. It's about the size of a quarter. And in the center of the pin is an illustration of a bunch of grapes. And this was part of the grape boycott that these 2 organizations had launched. So while we might remember the United Farm Workers and Chavez, here I wanted us to make sure that we remember that particular pin because it shows how 2 organizations really had to come together. They really had to come to a meeting of the minds to change the world, and they did.
President John F. Kennedy had campaigned on a platform of civil rights and support for the space program. Seeing the huge upside of recruiting a black astronaut, the White House gives the Pentagon an order. The Air Force responds fast. There's a young black pilot ready to start training. Captain Edward Dwight Jr., with a top aeronautics degree and 2,000 flying hours under his belt.
I did not dream that I was going to become the first black astronaut. That never entered my mind because that was a big obstacle standing in my way. And I knew there was going to be a racial component to that obstacle, but I didn't know it was going to be as sophisticated and as determined as it was.
In charge of training pilots to recommend to NASA's astronaut program is U.S. Air Force flying ace Captain Chuck Yeager, the first man to break the sound barrier. But Yeager is skeptical about integrating the program and says so years later in a memoir.
He was totally shocked that the Air Force power structure would force this to happen, not consult him, and not bring him into the loop and prepare for my coming down there.
August 1962. The Air Force announces Dwight is to start phase 1 of the training, a set of grueling physical tests.
The first phase is the academic qualifications, the flying record qualifications, and then the physical tests. They really take these men to their physical limits to see how they function in a centrifuge and how much stress they can take. And he passes that. The next phase is the flying phase. Learning how to do maneuvers, and these men are tremendously competitive.
Dwight graduates in October '63, 8th out of 16 in his class. He's recommended to NASA along with 26 other candidates from around the country. Now it's up to the space agency to make its selection.
Was there a Negro boy in the last 30 or so that you brought here for consideration?
No, there was not.
Dwight claims Yeager was biased against him.
He called all the instructors in, guys that were going to instruct me in test pilot school. And he announced to these people, if he graduates, Kennedy wants to turn the space program into a black space program.
We don't know if Chuck Yeager derailed Ed White's career, and historians have searched for evidence and haven't found it.
Are you now, in fact, completely out of the astronaut program? Is there a possibility of you ever being back in?
I don't know. I don't have any idea.
Do you feel it's what's happened to you is a setback for civil rights opportunities?
I would rather not comment on that. Had I succeeded, they wouldn't have no more excuses about how ignorant black people were, how they couldn't learn, how they couldn't accomplish. I was in the right place at the wrong time.
It's 1926, and Miami's economy is soaring, fueled by Northerners attracted to its tropical climate and pristine beaches. Through the decade, the population grows from 30,000 to over 100,000 residents. Its blue skies, crystal waters, and swaying palm trees make it the winter party destination for the wealthy. On September 17th, sun worshippers have no idea that a devastating hurricane is sweeping their way. That night, a 60-mile-wide Category 4 hurricane smashes into the city. Nearly 400 people are killed, and 43,000 left homeless. News cameraman Ralph Earl is trapped for 6 hours, capturing these images of Miami underwater. It is, perhaps, the earliest known storm chasing footage. Earl, on the left, flies his shocking footage himself to be distributed to the 20,000 movie theaters across the country. The rebuilding cost reaches $109 million, $165 billion today. Worse even than Hurricane Katrina. The University of Miami had just opened a year earlier and christened its teams the Hurricanes.
In Wyoming, out of a sea of ponderosa pines, rises Devil's Tower National Monument. This pillar of ancient lava is so unique, even geologists can't agree on exactly how it was formed. Its spectacular site led Teddy Roosevelt to designate it as America's first ever national monument in 1906, 2 years before the Grand Canyon. Today, it welcomes 400,000 visitors a year. More than a few are drawn to this tower by its association with extraterrestrials and UFOs. In fact, Devil's Tower's most famous visitor is an alien spaceship that landed on the summit in the grand finale of the sci-fi blockbuster Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Key scenes from Steven Spielberg's epic feature were filmed right here, cementing Devil's Tower as a magnet for our quirky obsession with UFOs.
With the plane now less than 5 miles from the runway, a controller in the airport's tower takes over to guide the flight in for landing.
Lindbergh, PSA 182, downwind.
182, roger.
Within the airport traffic area, which is that 5-mile radius, the airplanes coming into the airport to land and take off are controlled by that controller.
The tower controller is juggling several planes in addition to the PSA 727.
PSA 182, traffic 12 o'clock, 1 mile, a Cessna.
Because there's only one runway at Lindbergh, it requires some air traffic control spacing because of the difference in the speeds of the aircraft.
PSA 182, cleared to land.
182 is cleared to land.
The jets have quite a significantly faster approach speed than the Cessna, so you have to give them more spacing.
It's now 9 a.m. Many passengers on Flight 182 are planning to put in a full day's work in San Diego.
Gear down.
Minutes from landing, pilot Bob Fox spots a distant plane.
There's one underneath. I was looking at that inbound over there. Easy, baby, easy, baby.
A professional photographer happens to spot Flight 182 in flames.
Hey, what do we got here? It's bad. Huh? We're hit, man. We're hit. Tower.
We're going down. This is PSA.
Okay, we'll call the equipment for you.
The approach controller's radar reveals that the 727 has collided with the Cessna.
Jesus Christ. It's an aluminum shower.
To have two aircraft under your control collide is the worst nightmare, I think, for any controller. I don't think anything else could be that bad.
This is it, baby.
Brace yourself.
Ma, I love you.
And all of a sudden, just went right in. Just a burst of flames. It was just incredible.
Can't do anything about it. Come on. And my hair stood up on the back of my head when I learned that this crash had occurred. This huge mushroom cloud of smoke and fire was seen by thousands of people.
Two planes have collided and fallen from the sky over San Diego. The city is in shock. But the full scope of the tragedy is only beginning to emerge.
At 43, JFK is one of the youngest men to ever run for president. His hip approach to campaigning injects a new energy to politics.
I come to the Bronx as an old Bronx boy. I used to live in the Bronx.
The handsome young senator has a lot to overcome. But the Kennedy campaign has a plan to sell him to the country. Now, 90% of U.S. households own a television.
Good evening. The television stations of the United States are proud to provide facilities for a discussion of issues by the two major candidates for the presidency. The candidates
On September 26, 1960, 70 million people tune in to America's first televised presidential debate.
I'm not satisfied until every American enjoys his full constitutional rights.
JFK is prepped for his television appearance. The day before, he met with producers and discussed camera angles. He looks tanned and glowing.
I don't want the talents of any American to go to waste.
He is wearing a blue suit and shirt to reduce glare and stand out against the gray backdrop.
Mr. Smith, Senator Kennedy.
There is no
Nixon looks
but
exhausted.
that this nation
He's strayed from the
cannot
campaign
stand still.
trail and is recovering from the flu.
Tie vote when that single vote
He
given
also
that
has a
yes
knee
would have
injury,
granted salary
making him appear
increases.
uncomfortable and shifty.
I wonder if you can explain that, sir.
There is no question but that we cannot discuss our internal affairs in the United States without recognizing that they have a tremendous bearing on our international position.
Mr. Vice President,
His gray
since
suit
the
and pale
question of
face
executive
appear to
leadership
blend
is a
into the
very
set.
important campaign issue. I'd like to follow Mr.
The visual
Nolan's
contrast
question.
between the men
Now the
damages
candidates will
Nixon.
answer questions or comment upon one another's answers to questions.
Viewers think Kennedy has the edge, even though radio listeners have the opposite impression. During the debate, Kennedy's on-camera performance makes him look like a leader. And all doubts about his youth are forgotten. Studies will later show that this debate made up the minds of 4 million voters. 3 million vote for Kennedy.